All right, Rob, let's get to the World Series. And as we said, the Rangers won this thing in 5 games over the Atlanta Braves.
Arizona Diamondbacks.
I'm sorry.
You were thinking about what should have happened, right?
Right. My pick. But Rob, we both picked the Atlanta Braves to win the whole thing. And I think that the Atlanta Braves were the best team in baseball this season, but they didn't win the World Series, obviously didn't even get there. And that's not unusual. In baseball, oftentimes, the best team doesn't win. And I think the only way, because Arizona, obviously, and they didn't win it, but they certainly weren't the best team during the regular season, and neither was Texas, obviously. Arizona had the worst record of the teams, them in Miami, of the teams that qualified for the playoffs, and they got all the way to the World Series. And Texas, they battled Houston for that AL West crown all year long, finished in a tie, but Houston had the tiebreaker. But, they only won 90 games, and several teams won more than that. I think the only way, and if this is important, the only way, Rob, to have a chance for, I can't say assure, but to come closest to assuring that the best team wins is to go back to the old school, where you just had the team with the best record in the AL versus the team with the best record in the NL.
That's how the Yankees won all those championships.
Yeah,
there was no playoffs. When people talk about Yogi Berra and all those guys and Mickey Mantle, and they went to 10.
Right.
There was no playoffs. There was just They had the best team. And Chris, I brought this up a million times back in the 50s and 60s. The same teams won all the time. The Montreal Canadiens, right? Because there was no free agency. Right. The Green Bay Packers, the Boston Celtics, and the New York Yankees. That's who won all. They're the best teams.
Players weren't moving.
Right. So you couldn't get better.
To worry about losing somebody.
Right. How did the other teams get better? Right. Guys got older, Chris, in time, but they had dynasties.
Absolutely. And I got to be honest, I like it better the way it is right now with the playoffs. I like the expanded playoffs. I think it makes it more exciting. Each round is fun to watch. Obviously, sometimes you have blowouts here and there. You had a blowout in the World Series, but still, I prefer the playoff format that they have nowadays over the old days where you had just the pennant. And if you won your league, you played for the World Series. But I do think, Rob, that would be the best way to determine the best team. But I don't know that, you have to go to those lengths to do that.
Yeah, I get it, Chris. Like some of the best teams all year long, we didn't get to see. Really, they got knocked out early. The Atlanta Braves, star power up and down the lineup, right? They had a Rookie of the Year. Michael Harris II, Chris, batting 9th. I mean, that's how stacked that lineup was.
Incredible. It was historically great.
Right. You saw with Freddie Freeman and Mookie Betts all year, they were vying in the MVP race, two guys on the same team. They didn't make it. The Padres with their lineup, Chris, loaded. They didn't even make the playoffs. The Yankees, of course, Aaron Judge and everything, and that franchise and the history there, they didn't make the playoffs. The Mets won 101 games the year before. They imploded. They didn't make the playoffs. So some of the biggest and best teams either didn't make the playoffs, or when they did, they got knocked out quickly. So there was people like, oh, that's not good for the game, obviously, when you have smaller markets. But I'm going to say this. It's not a bad thing that other teams get a chance to win once in a while. I think that it makes other fan bases feel like it's just like we're not in this. Like Minnesota, we can't compete. We don't have the money. We're Tampa Bay. We're this, we're that. These teams have made the playoffs and made runs to the postseason, and they haven't won yet. But the Texas Rangers were one of those teams that kind of wasn't doing anything, Chris, like just, losing 100 games. They decide they build a new stadium. We're going to go and sign star players, and we're going to get in this.
Yeah, I think it's good when you can have different teams winning it. And that's what's happened in baseball. Right? We haven't had the last time a team repeated as the winner was what?
Was the Yankees.
Yeah, back in 2000.
That's crazy. 99, 2000.
Right.
Chris.
So you had 23 years where you haven't had a repeat team. That's great. That's what we call parity.
Yep.
And a lot of different teams. Texas, Houston last year, Atlanta before that, the Dodgers, the Nationals, right?
I mean, look at that. That's the last.
Boston,
how many?
Houston.
Yeah, that's 5 or 6, 7 years of different champions.
Yeah, and then Chicago before that, and Kansas City before that. So that is all well and good. What I think, Rob, has to be concerning, though, are the ratings. This was the lowest rated World Series ever. It was even lower than the pandemic year. And I think that has to be concerning. And baseball's got to, they got to find a way, I just think, to up their popularity. Because trending downward like that, I don't think is a good sign.
Yeah, they didn't trend down during the season. Ratings were up, and attendance was up 10 or 11%. I get it. When you have smaller markets, this is what happens because there are a lot of people, Chris. If you had the Yankees and the Dodgers or some bigger markets and household names in there, like you have a better shot at people who are their team is out of it, who still might pay attention. So you do have those kind of issues. I think I've said this before. The lowest rated NBA finals involved the San Antonio Spurs. Not that they weren't a great team, Chris, and you call them a dynasty with the 5 championships in 20 years. It's just a small TV market. So every time they play, doesn't matter. Who'd they lose to?
Those years
they played New Jersey, right? And you know this, Chris. They don't have the New Jersey Nets never really had a real solid fan base.
No.
People in New York, when they made the finals, they could care less. Am I right?
No, I mean, they weren't selling out their playoff games. They weren't selling out playoff games. Right. So you remember that. But yeah, the lowest, I'm trying to look at the lowest rated. I don't know if this will have it. Yeah, but the lowest rated finals. But
I thought it was the New Jersey Spurs.
Yeah, I think that was it. But the Spurs obviously played in a ton of finals, and I don't know that every year that was the case.
No, the 2 lowest before the 2020, before the pandemic, because I think that was the lowest. Oh, Rob G, you got the numbers. Am I right? The Spurs are they got 2 or 3 spots in the lowest.
Yeah, before the bubble year. Spurs Cavs actually 2007 with the young LeBron James
Look at that.
did worse than the Spurs.
Yeah, I remember
Nets.
that shocked me because
LeBron
did I. Was 22 years old.
And then what he had done to beat the Pistons, how did that not spark people to want to watch that? But again, the markets are smaller, right?
Well, and then the 3 of the lowest rated finals have been in the last 4 years.
Which is crazy.
The bubble year, the Bucks winning, and then last season with Jokic, who was the best player in the world and somehow still couldn't rate.
But
that would play into the smaller market.
It is. Those are all small markets. Milwaukee, Denver, and you would think, again, Giannis, is one of the all-time great players, but it's Milwaukee. Yep. And I think when you deal with that,
one of the all-time great
as well, too. Chris, but it's Denver. So it does hurt you when you don't get the numbers from TV, but
USA Today had this low World Series TV. This is their headline. Right. Low World Series TV ratings in 2023 continue 7-year downward trend. So, like I said, they got to do something. They made some good moves this year. I think they sped up the games, but I think even beyond that, I think they literally sped up the game with the bigger base paths and that increased stolen bases. So I think that helps, but they can't rest on their laurels because a 7-year decline is not something that you can sit on.